Our next panel is going to be led by Maria Flynn. I'm going to give her a quick introduction and then turn it over to her to introduce the rest of this distinguished panel. As you all know, Maria is the president and CEO of Jobs for the Future. She is a national authority on the future of work, the role of technology in the labor market, career pathways for learners and workers underserved by the education and workforce systems, and employer engagement. And she has been an amazing partner to social finance. We couldn't ask for a better moderator for this particular panel, and we appreciate you all joining us today. So Maria, the stage is yours.
Great. Thanks so much, Karen, and hello, everyone. It's great to be here today. And I just want to start by saying congratulations to Tracy and Karen on the launch of the Institute. And as Karen mentioned, we've had the great pleasure at JFF of being partners with social finance on many terrific initiatives over probably a decade or more. And so looking forward to continuing that. And a big thank you to Tracy for being such a wonderful friend and mentor to me. So as we all know, we always need friends who are peers who we can, just like talk it all out with. And Tracy is one of those people for me. So thank you. We had a pretty good opening act, right? So we're going to talk about workforce. So we had some good folks setting the stage for us for sure. And I am joined by three amazing leaders today. We have Niyum Gandhi, who is the CFO and treasurer of Mass General Brigham. We have Scott Pulsipher, who is the president of Western Governors University. And we have Secretary Yvonne, who is the Secretary of Economic Development for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And so I'm just going to pull really three themes that we heard from the prior panel to kick us off today, right? So one is that we have this very unique labor market moment, right? As we heard, like 26 months straight of an unemployment rate below 4%, right? The first time that has happened in 54 years, I believe. We have a moment when technology is changing more rapidly than we have ever seen. Not that technology change is new, but I think the moment that we're in is new. And then we are continuing to really experience deep inequities. And sitting here in the Boston area always reminds me of the Boston Globe story that looked at the racial wealth gap in Boston, right? That white households in Boston, I believe it said, had annual or net worth of over $200,000, and for black households, it was just $8, right? So we can't ignore that all of these changes and that these conditions are happening at a moment when inequities persist and are continuing to deepen. So I'm going to ask Scott to really help set the stage for us because you are really on the front lines and seeing how fast changes are happening. I think, and probably a lot of us in the workforce field, think that this issue of how can education and training keep pace with labor market demand, right, is one of the age-old questions, right? It's kind of this holy grail that we're always searching for. My guess is that now it's probably harder than ever, but what are you seeing?
Just by quick intro to give some perspective to my response to Maria's question is that WGU was literally founded by Western governors of 19 Western states and territories, and they founded to solve this particular problem, which is how do they actually meet the talent needs of their growing workforces to continue to feed the growth that they desired in their respective economies. And they realized that there were large cross-sections of the respective populations that were not being served by their existing public systems of higher education. The other thing that they noted is that much of those pathways were not actually directly relevant to the emerging skill areas that were needed in the workforce. And so, fast forward to today, WGU is in fact the largest university in the country. We graduate, I think we'll pass 50,000 graduates this year, and growing at 20+% a year. But one thing that we're particularly noticing on this point is that while we can maintain our core around bachelor's degrees, 3/4 of our students enrolled in bachelor's degrees, and 25% master's degrees, what we're actually seeing is even with our competency-based model and that being a shorter time to completing that degree compared to a conventional model, is that that's not even fast enough for the employers in the workforce today. So of the 250 or so direct partnerships that we have with employers across the sectors of health, technology, teacher education, and also business, is that what we're finding is that they're trying to figure out how to activate even larger numbers of individuals into these rapidly changing workforce areas where the skills that are needed have a shelf life that may be 2 to 5 years, not 7 to 10 years. And so what they're collaborating with us on are trying to figure out, like, hey, we love the fact that your graduates complete a bachelor's degree in 2.5 years, but is there something that they complete in 6 to 9 months? And that's particularly true when you're considering about how to activate this population of individuals that are in the 25 to 40-year-old range, those that may have already had even a bachelor's degree, because the upskilling that's required across the technology and how it's affecting pretty much all sectors of the economy. Technology itself is a sector, but the reality is that technology jobs itself are the #1 job across virtually all sectors of our economies. That's what they're looking for. And what are these individuals who may already have a bachelor's degree, who may already be working in relatively high resiliency jobs? They're trying to figure out ways to upskill them in particular areas, whether it is in cybersecurity or whether it's in mental and behavioral health challenges or population health, or whether it's in STEM teaching and teachers that have been teaching for 20 years. Like, those are the things. And guess what? You can't send those individuals into a bachelor's program. It's just too long of a runway. And so that's what we're working on now. Having said that, from the employer standpoint, they're also having to figure out that, guess what, higher ed institutions, even as quick as WGU may be able to be, that's not the only source of training and upskilling. And so you certainly see employers are getting pretty innovative around how they part with new emerging learning and training and academic pathways that are quicker, faster, cheaper, and more relevant than what they may have had before as talent pipelines. And so that has certainly led even institutions like WGU to invest more in micro-credentialing. One big differentiator for us is that we also are awarding academic credit for those, so it's fully stackable into the next credential and onward, so you don't end up in a cul-de-sac. But employers are recognizing that sometimes that has to be a little more customized or bespoke, meaning that it's pretty unique to what they're needing in their particular large employment space or in their sector. But as it gets more broadly based, the employers don't want to build educational systems that is something that not only they in their sector need, but everyone in the sector needs. Otherwise, it becomes a wasted investment, and they, in fact, should have a third-party service provider provide. And so that's where we do see emerging providers like Coursera and Pluralsight, even for that, was a big provider of that. And so I think some of those are going to continue to emerge because that's the pace of change that's occurring. So,
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And Secretary Howe, let's go to you, and would love to hear you talk about what you're seeing here in the Commonwealth and some of the initiatives that you and the governor are putting into place to really help this alignment come into fruition.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Maria. And first of all, I'll just say what a tremendous honor it is to be here, and huge congratulations to Tracy. I remember when Tracy was thinking about starting this organization and was like, will it work? Will it not work? Should I do this? And then to see the impact that this organization has had in so many ways, and to have this institute, congratulations, and thank you so much. And thank you so much for putting together this incredible panel. We think about all of these things deeply in Massachusetts, and we are working on these things right now with Governor Healy and our cabinet, and we have Chief Hoffer here as well, and we have folks from HHS here too. I would say all three of the themes you started with are highly relevant. So the first is that in our state, we are really lucky, or we are performing really well. Our unemployment rate is actually lower than the national average, and it has been very low, and we like to celebrate that. However, the flip side of that is we have not had our labor workforce participation rate get back to pre-pandemic levels until maybe just recently, or maybe we're not quite there yet. And our participation rate is lower than the national average. And we have massive job shortages across the state. Everywhere I go, every region, whether it's a hotel, a restaurant, a life sciences company, a tech company, a farm, everyone is having workforce shortages. So I guess it's good as unemployment rate is low, but it's also it's a challenge for our growth. So the second thing that you mentioned is technology. And we in Massachusetts, we lead, we innovate. That is the role that we've always played and we continue to play. And I would say the pace of technology is accelerating, and AI is, they were just talking about, it's not a fad. It's not something that's going to go away. It's not something we can like put in a corner or shove under a rug and try to protect against it. And again, we lead here. And so we had a lot of conversations with the governor about AI is happening. It's going to impact everything we do and how we live in our economy. What do we want to do about it? And so a lot of states and federal governments are trying to play defense and trying to regulate. We here in our state want to play offense. How do we embrace AI and accelerate the adoption of AI in smart ways that help solve big problems? And also, by the way, create better jobs for all of our talented workers. And how do we get more people to become AI specialists? And so we launched an executive order for an AI task force across the state, put together an awesome group of folks, and we are now underway. And at the end of this period, late this summer, we'll be presenting a set of recommendations. And in our economic development bill that we filed, we have a set of resources and funds to try to invest in that. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is one that I think about all the time in terms of inequality. So we are very lucky in our state. We are the wealthiest state. So if you look at income per capita, we just surpassed Connecticut. So we are the wealthiest state in the country, which is awesome. However, what's deeply not awesome, and I think about more, is that we are the third most income unequal state. That is deeply embarrassing for us. And when you double click on that and look at where does that income inequality come from, for sure it's by race and ethnicity. It's a lot by educational background. It's also a lot in our state by region. If you look at Boston and Cambridge versus parts of Central or Western Mass or North Shore or South Shore, it's a $40,000 or $50,000 gap. It's massive. We have so much to do here. So if you think about our state, we have, I think, one of our secret weapons, and the reason why we've been so successful as an economy is that we have awesome talent. We have some of the best K through 12 education, so our homegrown talent is amazing. And every year we bring 500,000 of the best brains from around the country and the world to come study here. So the question for us is, how do we help every kind of talent succeed and stay here in Massachusetts? So just an example, and I don't want to take up all the time, but just an example of one of the other things we're working on is last June, the Governor Healy announced this initiative called Mass Talent, which is really an umbrella around 4 key areas where our state leads, we have huge demand, and you have a lot of job opportunities for people who don't need college degrees. And so those 4 areas are around climate. So Chief Hoffer and we've been partnering very closely on this around creating a whole next generation of green electricians, green construction workers, all of the jobs that are needed to go into offshore wind and everything else. So that's one vertical. A second one is around advanced manufacturing and robotics. Again, we lead in this area. These are great jobs that don't require a college degree. There is a third vertical around healthcare. So we have some of the world's best hospitals and lots of jobs there that don't require a nursing degree, that can require certifications. And then the fourth and last one is around life sciences and biomanufacturing. All 4 of these areas are places where without a college degree, with some training and certifications, you could have a starting job of $30, $40, $50, $60, $70 an hour with a career path. And so the goal of Mass Talent is to make it simpler. How do we make it easier? And one of the benefits of our state, but also a challenge, is that we have a lot, which makes it complex. And so as I travel around, in each of these 4 areas, you find that, and this is probably why you created why you banded together 19 states. We have a place here that trains, 10 people, and a place here that trains, 12 people, and this one is 3 weeks, and this one's 3 months, and this one's 6 months, and this one trains 20 people, and this one, and nothing is standardized. And if you're a company, it's very, very confusing. And if you're someone who wants to go into one of these paths, it's very confusing. So we're trying to make it simpler for both our talent and our employers with something like Mass Talent.
That's great, thank you. And so Niyum, you are on the front lines. So how is this? My colleagues are on the front lines. Yes. That's the real front lines. So how is this playing out for you? And how are you thinking about kind of the need for talent, how you're accessing that talent? What are some of the pain points that are top of mind for you?
So at the risk of sounding negative, I'll start with some kind of scary numbers that we see. So I was checking our dashboard on the way in today. So we're running a 6.9% vacancy rate, which sounds high. That's down from a peak of 14% about 18 months ago. If I put that in absolute numbers, since we're the largest employer in the Commonwealth, that's about 7,000 jobs, 7,000 jobs. Right now, 6,900. And so when we look at those sorts of numbers, we peaked at well north of 10,000 vacancies. That's scary when we think about what's needed to just deliver safe and effective care. So then, and all the things that the prior panel talked about in terms of What happens when the labor market is tight? What happens with wages? One of the other challenges we have and why it got so bad in healthcare is that our revenue doesn't move with inflation. So we did 7.4% in frontline worker wage increases last year. Our revenue per unit of service went up 1.3%. Because more than half of our revenue is federal and state government money, right? So your taxes don't go up, in that way. Medicare payments don't go up. And so it's created this really difficult labor market dislocation. And then you take our 82,000 jobs that we have, 72,000 of those jobs are in-person jobs. They can't be done remotely. The other 10,000, we've said fully remote, work wherever you want. But the number of people who want a full-time 5-day-a-week, 6-day-a-week, in person, in the hospital, in the clinic job has shrunk as well. So those are kind of the challenges we're facing. We are in a better spot than we used to be. The other piece, and I think, as Secretary Howe mentioned, a lot of attention has been on certain types of highly skilled workforce, like nurses, physicians, and there is a nurse shortage and there is a physician shortage. But we're running 30% vacancies for surge techs, right? 20% for rad techs, right? So these are people who make things work in the hospital. If you don't have the surge techs, you can't get a surgery. And so, we're adapting in that model, trying to figure out, and I know we'll talk about partnership and other opportunities, but just to lay the groundwork of how dire the crisis is as we look at where we need to get to, where we're kind of recovered a good bit from where we were, 2 years ago or 18 months ago, but still at a point where, if we can't fill those jobs, we either need to shut down services, and then people can't get the care that they need. We're running at 102% occupancy in our hospitals. I've been here for 3 years, so of the 160 or so weeks, we've had 2 where we've been under 100% occupancy. And so when people have to defer care, when people get clogged up in the ED because we can't get them through, that has a real care impact. But also, how do we think about addressing the labor issues in a sustainable manner, not just going after travelers and getting people to come in for 12 weeks of work. So those are the types of things that we're thinking through as we plan for the future. Sorry, that's the most negative I'll be. Everything else on the panel, I'll be forward-thinking and positive.
Well, let's switch to the positive a little bit. Are there some initiatives that you all have now that are giving you hope? Things that might,
and I think it's kind of the theme of what we're talking about here related to partnerships. So, again, on the high end of the workforce, we train a lot of our own, and we will continue to do that. We're the largest single-site medical residency program in the country. I see Paula here. We have a great nursing school, the Institute for Health Professions, which I'm biased, I think, is the finest nursing institution in the country. So we train our own in a lot of other places.
I graduate more than most of you. So, yeah.
But yeah, shots fired. Sorry. But now I think we took, and in the last panel they talked about this, of just kind of outsourcing the development for other types of roles to just kind of whatever is out there. And I think we're realizing that's not the right way to approach it. And so we've deepened our partnerships with community colleges to get people through associate's degrees and certificate programs for things like surge techs and rad techs, and the initiative that I'm most excited about, partly because I'm I think on a very long time horizon. We recently launched a partnership with Boston Public Schools and Bloomberg Philanthropies to double the size of the Edward M. Kennedy School for Health Professions. And so that's huge. And that ties to the inequity challenge, right? That school is right near the Longwood Medical area, and there are jobs ready to go, and we've been constrained, right, between the combination of public sector resources and private sector resources. And so tapping into public, private, and philanthropy to get that going. And we know there will be an ROI in that, such that we feel comfortable underwriting the future of that program as the philanthropy subsides. And so I think we would have never thought about something like that pre-pandemic. It just would have never occurred to us to be that creative.
and I think continuing to look at models where we can engage students earlier, right, so that they're aware of what these career paths are, that they can start getting that experience, particularly paid experience, even when they're still in the high schools, I think is really terrific. And so, Scott, you have jumped into the nursing shortage issue in a pretty big way. So maybe tell us, how has How has that been working? And maybe tell us a bit about what makes the WGU approach unique in that way.
Sure. Maybe let me start with just one model, or at least a paradigm shift I think is occurring to even how we think about providing educational pathways to opportunity or development pathways to opportunity, is that most of us in this room probably experienced what I like to call one and done model of education to work, which you pretty much acquire whatever credential you're going to acquire, and then you go get that job, and then off you go your merry way for 40 years. And we'll attribute all the gains that you had for those 40 years, by the way, back to you getting that degree 40 years prior, like the longest attribution window I've ever seen. But that's what we do because we think that's the golden ticket. But what's actually changing, the paradigm is becoming more about first and next. Because it is more of a continual upskilling that has to occur, and it's more transparent and obvious because skills are becoming more apparent too, versus a rather blunt force instrument that was a degree or still is a degree. Is that it's actually whether you're competent in the skills that are needed for the specific job that we're trying to fill, whether it's a surge tech or a medical assistant, or whether it's actually a nurse, et cetera. And those skills are actually becoming a better currency because they're more directly articulate for the individual hiring manager who's trying to fill those positions. It's also more equitable because you can now start to service the hidden talent that have those skills regardless of where they acquired the skills, et cetera. And so we apply that kind of lens to all the kind of pathways that we see in helping individuals develop for whatever their next opportunity is, whether it's their first one or their next one. And so nursing is a good example of that, is that we certainly see that specifically with respect to clinical outcomes, that they are better when you have a bachelor's in nursing than they are if you are just an RN. And so one of our largest programs is, in fact, the RN to bachelor's in nursing programs, and that's why 17% of bachelor's and nurses in the country are WGU graduates, because, in fact, we serve that upskilling need in a way that no one else was actually doing that, and we're doing that across all 50 states. Well, we also recognize that you need to dramatically expand pre-licensure nursing. But then what are the programs even before nursing that exist into other areas? Which is why you'll see us introducing this year's psychology degrees, because guess what? What is the primary pathway to behavioral and mental health professionals? Like, those are one of those primary pathways. But you'll also see us in medical coding and also in medical assistant, et cetera, because we see those as pathways. Interestingly enough, all the way down to a CNA, by the way, which is odd that you have to spend that kind of money to get a job that only pays $17.50 an hour. But guess what is the primary source for net new nurses? CNAs. And so if you can build that whole stackable pathway, that exists not just in health, but it exists in technology, exists in a lot of different fields, where you can actually have a full stack developer that doesn't have a bachelor's degree. But it can't be a cul-de-sac. The one thing we did discover in working in California, particularly around allied health positions, is that many of those jobs are career cul-de-sacs, meaning that if you want to stack on top of that to your next step in your career, you have to go back to start to acquire the net set of skills that you need for the next job, and that stinks. Pharma tech is one of those dead-end jobs in the health field, by the way. It's like you spend $10,000 to get a $28,000 a year job. And then if you want to go into anything new, you basically have to spend more than twice that to stack on top of that. That can't be our future. If you really want to have a first and next and really have a 30-plus year career in a field, you have to be stacking that kind of skill set. How most of us did that previously is, by the way, we were just learning on the job, and we're being awarded the benefit of that learning while you were on the job. The difference, what we see going forward, is that employers don't have that scale, if you will, to say, I can't be certifying every cybersecurity professional that I need in my organization. By the way, just as a point of interest, 5 years ago, we introduced our bachelor's in cybersecurity. Within 1 year, we had 5,000 people enrolled in it. It is now the largest program at WGU with more than 25,000 people enrolled in it. It grew 60% this last year alone in enrollment. It's insane. That, to me, is an example that no employer can actually upskill the cybersecurity professionals at the scale that they need it, let alone across the entire industry. So that kind of first and next is a paradigm that we like to advance. Is like you can't solve for just one job first. The individual is always wanting to progress, and how do you make the education or the skill attainment more woven into that career?
Secretary Howe, the prior speakers talked a lot about this moment where we're seeing this really, I feel, unprecedented investment in industrial policy, both through the climate work and the infrastructure work and the bipartisan bills that have been passed in Congress, which is great. But I think it does raise questions about how do we continue to get the public sector involved in these efforts. And so if you could maybe speak to like what you're seeing in the Commonwealth, are employers coming to the table in new ways? Like how is your team kind of working with them to really get the talent needs highlighted and responded to?
Yeah, no, I think we are living in a very unique window in time where there is a ton of federal opportunity for states to compete on. Last year, we did compete hard, and we won 2 of those opportunities. So we won one of the 2 hubs for ARPA-H, President Biden's healthcare initiative, which brings billions of dollars of R&D and research grants through our state. So we're very proud of that. And we also competed very hard and won a very big CHIPS and Science Coalition program. Again, lots of focus on leading edge technologies. So we are trying our best to compete and bring those to our state. But on a statewide level, it is interesting. So maybe just for some people who may not know, my entire career up until the last year has been in the private sector. And so I came into this role, feel very honored and privileged to be here, getting a chance to serve our incredible state, and was trying to figure out, what does state government do? And do we have like a magic wand? Is there like a giant pool of money? We have like, infinite powers. It turns out that's not true, sadly. And I think it's also true that there are many, many things that should be left to the private sector. In general, I think markets work, and they're very efficient at many, many things. But there are times where markets do not work, where there's market failure, and that is really when the state should and needs to get involved. And I talk a lot in our administration about the 5 powers that I think we use very well in the state. So we have 5 key tools in our toolbox. One is we have the power to convene. And this is an incredible thing. And we talk a lot. It's like a drinking game in my team of how many times I mention Team Massachusetts, because when we work across the public sector and private sector and academia and nonprofits, we are an awesome team. And this is the first time I've ever had someone else wearing it. So this is a very proud moment for me. Thank you for being on Team Massachusetts. And the convening, we can get you on Team Massachusetts. I can fix that. Yes. Okay.
I need one.
We will get you one. But an example of convening is exactly what Scott was saying here, which is that getting employers to work together to say, you're all life sciences companies. You're all hiring quality assurance people, or you're all hiring lab techs. Instead of each of you doing your small thing with your tiny little differences, how about we get together, standardize this, and then get community colleges together and trainers together and get funnels together of where the students are, and just standardize and scale this thing, and we know it works. And so that convening power is what we're doing with things like mass talents. It's very important. Second thing is we have money. So we have taxpayer dollars, and we can give out grants and loans and tax incentives and all kinds of workforce training programs. How do we deploy those monies in the highest impact way possible? So example is in life sciences, to continue that example, we're giving out $10,000 to $12,000 grants per student. And we're saying this grant is available, come compete on it. To compete on it, you have to have an employer with a set of commitments to hire people when they're done, a trainer that's committed to standardizing it, and then oftentimes schools who are funneling students. So we're giving these grants out through Mass Life Sciences and putting our state dollars behind this, and we know this is going to pay off in future jobs. The third power we have is we have the power to change regulation. This is really important in workforce. So for example, we just filed a bill, and in that bill we said, if people are trained physicians somewhere else, why do we make it so hard for them to come and be physicians in our state? We know we have a big shortage. This shouldn't be that complicated. So how do we have a much more streamlined process? And also in our budget that we just got back today from the House, how do we create a reciprocity office so that, again, if you're trained as a nurse in another state, why do we have to make you start from scratch? Can we just, of course we want to have quality, but let's just make it easier. So changing regulation is really important. Our fourth power is we are a customer. So we spend a lot of money. We have a $56 billion state budget. We have 55,000 employees. How do we use our employer and our purchasing power to set the tone and to set the standard? So for example, we launched in our state initiative saying we're going to do skills-based hiring. Every job, with a few exceptions, no longer requires a college degree. It's going to be based just on skills. And we also, under Secretary Jones in Workforce Development, have convened a set of employers to say they're going to follow in our footsteps and do skills-based hiring. So we're going to walk the talk. And then the fifth thing, which is very powerful, especially with Governor Healy, is we can message very effectively. And so having the governor come out and say, we think the days of everything having to have a bachelor's degree is not helpful. We're going to go to skills-based hiring. We're going to focus on workforce development. These are important messages to get out there. We're going to focus on green jobs. And so those are the 5 powers we have, and the priority we have in our administration is how do we use these 5 powers in alignment across the cabinet in a very focused way to make the biggest impact on these issues.
Awesome. So I'm going to,
To what Secretary Howe is also raising is... No, yeah, there's a 6th power one. Yeah. One way in which I think federal and state is actually working really well to change these kind of pathways to opportunity and enable the workforce is around apprenticeships. Is certainly one of the areas that we see really encouraging. Also, the skills-based hiring is a really important factor because it dramatically increases the equitability of the actual hiring practices and the workforce and everything else like that. It also increases the relevancy of the credentials that are being minted by institutions like WGU if they are skills architected and skills transcripted. But the incredible value of apprenticeship too, and this is where there are federal dollars and state budgets that are heavily investing now in these work-based learning pathways, is that it also is skill and competency oriented, not academic oriented. It doesn't matter where you actually learn the skills that are needed for the job. And if we elevate the work-based learning to be the same as academic-based learning, it's like you're also advancing the development of the workforce and the opportunities for individuals from all different backgrounds, that you don't actually, in fact, say one is better than the other. What really matters is whether you're competent in the skills that are needed for the job, that we don't care how you learn it. And in some fields, particularly where we're particularly interested right now, are in teaching and health. In fact, so much of what you need to show and demonstrate is actually learned on the job. So parapros and paraeducators or paraprofessionals in health are some of the best candidates to serve with these models, to which now we, WGU as an institution, can also award academic credit to as well, so that, guess what, again, it becomes stackable and portable into what they want to do next. And it's been really encouraging to see state funding and then federal funding to back that up to start advancing the development of these pathways as well.
Niyum, are there ways that you're seeing kind of apprenticeships or work-based learning take hold in your...
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, and maybe just first narrowly on healthcare and then more broadly, you know, I think that in healthcare, we often talk out of both sides of our mouths on this topic, right? We say that, you know, we have heavily, practicum-based, apprenticeship-based sort of roles, but then we're probably the worst offenders of this not making things stackable, to your point, Scott, right? I mean, and I think in a prior, again, thinking back to the prior panel, in a world in which people thought about jobs and careers differently, it might have been okay, right? It might have been okay to say, okay, you know, you're a CNA, then you become a nurse, and you kind of stay the same type of nurse for a long time, and my dad was a pharmacist, and he was a pharmacist for 40 years, and that was just kind of thought of as normal. And I think we're seeing disproportionately the people who we're bringing in now don't want that. And so then the question becomes, how can we develop their skills? Not just how can we bring them in earlier, have them develop the last set of skills they need so that they have what they need to do the job, but also give them the opportunity to learn kind of skills in a parallel track. Right, and promoting horizontal and diagonal movement across the organization. We're just starting to scratch the surface of that. Thinking about even if somebody does need to go back for a different type of degree. Let's say they're environmental services worker and say, yeah, you know, I have my associate's degree. I want to go to get a certificate and be a surge tech. Well, okay, you know, we can offer tuition credits for that. Do we offer income replacement? Right? And so we're starting to think about that. It's something we're talking to social finance about. You know, are there other types of partnerships that we can create to allow the mix of on-the-job training and maybe what they need to go back to get something, so that you can, I know it's a trite statement of the 1 + 1 = 3, but I think there is a power there. There still are people who want to work in certain industries like healthcare and higher ed, where there's some sort of attachment to mission there, and hopefully we can create paths that will become the new normal paths that were not the paths of 30 years ago.
Yeah, the state of California actually passed something like this, where there's a specific high road grant that's particularly targeted at emerging teachers that need to do student teaching, but have to leave their job to do that. And so effectively the grant is to replace the lost wages so they can complete their demonstration teaching and become the licensed teacher. It's also particularly targeted individuals that already live in the communities that need the teachers. Because guess what? If you reach and teach those individuals and they already live in the community which you need the teacher, they stay in that school district, rather than teaching a rural community for 2 to 4 years and then leaving. The same thing happens in healthcare. Like, you pay a lot of money, recruit that individual to live in a place that they don't want to live, versus how do you upskill the individuals who already choose to live in that community and they stay in that community. So there are states that are doing exactly this kind of grant giving as to how do you enable that, activation of opportunity.
Unfortunately, we are at time, so I know there were more questions. I encourage you to catch the panelists at the reception and chat some more, but please join me in thanking Secretary Howell and Scott and Niyum. Thank you.